in the world is it easiest to get rich? That's the question I asked my professor when I studied sociology in the early 90s. Because he was having a lecture about social democracies, Scandinavian welfare state, and he was a classical left-wing sociology professor, and he could not hide his enthusiasm when he talked about these egalitarian societies with no rich people and no poor people. But I, on the other hand, I was writing my master thesis about rich people. So when I interviewed my informants from the upper classes, they all said the same thing. Life in Scandinavia is tough. We have to work twice as hard to earn money because we have to struggle against high taxes, strong unions controlling the wages, and a generous welfare state that makes people lazy. As one rich guy told me, he said, they call it a social security net. Well, I call it a hammock. And as every aspiring social scientist, I had starting to go native. I started to feel sympathy for these rich people. And that's why I raised my hand and asked my professor, well, what if you don't care so much about equality? What if your dream is to become rich? Where in the world should I have been born to become really rich? I still remember the puzzled look on my professor's face. But he answered the best he could, something like, well, if that's your goal in life, you should probably have been born in a society with free markets, low taxes, and minimal government intervention. And he added, if you want to become rich, you should probably not study sociology. And that was a good answer, and the best guess we had back then. That is, until I saw that the University of Oslo professor in economy, Kalle Moene, actually had checked the facts. Where in the world it's easiest to get rich? And before I share with you where you should go to earn money, we have to define rich. The UN talks about the poverty line. You know, if you earn less than $1 a day, maybe $2 a day, but we have to define the richness line. It's a more fun line, actually. And the most reliable report when it comes to rich people, the Wealth Report, they set the richness line at individuals with net worth more than $30 million US. And in the consultant jargon, these people are called UHNWIs. That is, ultra-high net worth individuals. That guy, by the way, he's not rich, he's just a model. Actually, on the lower part of the model. And I saved some money by keeping the watermark there as well. Smart. So, according to the Wealth Report, there are more than 170,000 UHNWIs in the world. And here's the top 5 list of countries with the most rich people. Number 5, China, with more than 8,000, UK, Germany, Japan, and on top, of course, United States with more than 40,000 rich people. But of course, we're not interested in the absolute numbers here. We are interested in rich people per capita, per million inhabitants. And if we leave out the pure tax havens, like Cyprus and Switzerland, Hong Kong, Singapore, Monaco, who have an artificially huge share of rich people. It turns out that we have on number 5 Denmark, with 179 rich people per million inhabitants, Canada, New Zealand, Sweden, and on top, Norway. But where's the US? On place 13. So what happened to my old professors, social democracies? There are no rich people there. But okay, $30 million, that's just pocket money in a country like the US, where people can get insanely rich. I got the watermark again. So let's rise the richness line up from $30 million up to $1 billion. And the most reliable source here is the Forbes billionaires list. And according to the Forbes, if we look at billionaires per million inhabitants, on number 5, Germany, 1.2 million billionaires. No, 1.2 billionaires per million inhabitants. United States, 1.7, Norway, 2, Sweden, and on top Iceland with 3.1. With a single billionaire, Thor Bjørgolfsson. He could have been a model. But the point is, United States, 1.7, Scandinavia taken as a whole, 2.1, and the big mystery is, how can this be? How can Bernie Sanders' dream societies, these socialist paradises, be such a breeding place for rich people? That's a mystery. And there are 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is free education. Social democracies give free higher education to everybody, and cheap student loans and grants, and that enables more people to use their talents and earn money. We can see this in the social mobility numbers. Imagine all fathers in a society, and we divide them into 5 groups based on income, from the bottom 5th up to the top 5th. And then we look at their sons, and then divide their income into 5 steps. And we see how many sons of the fathers from the bottom income end up on top. How many sons goes from rags to riches? If it was perfect social mobility, if talents and opportunities were equally distributed, 20% from the bottom would end up on each of these 5 ladders. So let's look at the numbers for the different countries. In Denmark, they're pretty close to perfect social mobility, with 14% goes from rags to riches. In Norway, it's 12, Sweden, 11, United States, 8. Because of free education, there are more self-made men in Scandinavia than in the US. And if we look at those sons who don't end up on top, but stay on the bottom, who goes from rags to rags, again, 20% would be perfect mobility. In Denmark, 25% ends up on the bottom. Sweden, a bit more. Norway, look at the United States. This is because education in the United States is very expensive. But the second and most important explanation for Scandinavia being such a breeding place for rich people is this. Have you ever noticed, if you've been to the United States, when you drive around and you drive through a toll plaza, there's actually people sitting there taking your money. Compare that to my local toll plaza. Just a sign with some gizmo attached to it. And when you go to a supermarket in the United States, there are actually people there helping to pack your things into your bags. It's very friendly and convenient compared to my local grocery store. It's like this. There's nobody there. The biggest shock I had when I went to the US for the first time, when I went to the restroom, there are actually people working there. Compare that to my local public toilet. There's not even a cleaner there. It cleans itself automatically. And the reason for this difference is that Scandinavian unions are pressing up the minimum wages. So it's so expensive to have these people working there. In Norway, a toll booth operator, supermarket packer, and a restroom janitor would earn almost 3 as much as in the US. And that's why we have replaced these people with machines. And that is why I was surprised when I saw this article in the New York Times in 2014. Preparing for chip and PIN cards in the United States. Because in the United States, people are still using paper checks as a method of payment, while Scandinavian banks have made us start using chip and PIN cards long ago. Because the minimal wages here are so high, so Scandinavian banks can't afford having people manually controlling the checks. So Scandinavian companies, because of the unions pressing up the wages, they have to downsize and introduce new technology, or else they will go broke. And new technology increases the productivity in a society, which in the long run also increases profit. And on the upper end of the wage ladder, in the name of solidarity, Scandinavian unions hold back the highest salaries of the skilled workers. So, for example, a Norwegian senior engineer, he's my uncle, by the way. That's why there's no watermark there. Actually, he would look cooler with a watermark, but he earns, on average per year, $76,000, while his American colleague earns more than $100,000. So, American engineers, they are not only more good-looking, but they are more expensive. So, of course, this wage restraint on high-skilled work is good for profit. So, the unions are in effect subsidizing the capitalists. I wish I knew all this when I gave up a career in social science, because the beauty and the irony of this finding, I think it's amazing. On the one hand, you have my rich informants that complained about how hard it is to get rich in Scandinavia, and they had it all wrong. Not only is it easier to get rich in a social democracy, but they are critical to the very institutions that have helped them getting rich. High taxes, which gives free education and more talent into the economy. Strong unions that are helping increasing the productivity. And the generous welfare state that make the unions accept downsizing because they know that their members will be well taken care of. So the unions cooperate because of the safety net. So rich people are a bit like Immanuel Kant's famous bird, who thinks she could fly even faster in airless space, forgetting that it's the air itself that gives her lift. And on the other part of the political spectrum, when Bernie Sanders is praising Scandinavian societies, he forgets that these are not anti-rich or anti-capitalist systems, because the welfare state and unions work in tandem with capitalist dynamics. And I think that is the most important lesson here. The economy is not a zero-sum game. We're in this together. And that is why Scandinavia is a better place to fulfill the American dream than America itself. Thank you so much.